He fell into her world by accident. Now she'll spill the blood of anyone who tries to claim him. The quantum storm tore through space like the galaxy's fury given form, writhing tendrils of energy that could shred a battleship's hull in seconds. Jake Sullivan gripped the controls of his reconnaissance craft, sweat beading along his forehead as proximity alarms screamed their warnings. Every pilot in the Earth fleet knew the cardinal rule: avoid the quantum barriers at all costs. Jake flew straight into them. "Come on, baby," he whispered to his ship as another energy wave slammed against the shields. The hull groaned, metal stressed beyond its limits, but he adjusted course with practiced precision. His neural implant processed the storm's chaotic patterns, finding navigation paths where instruments showed only death. 20 years of military flight training had taught him to read impossible conditions. But this was different. This felt like the storms were responding to him. The energy readings spiked beyond the red line. His ship bucked violently, throwing him against his restraints as system after system failed. The quantum storm had been beautiful from a distance, an aurora of lethal light. Up close, it was pure hunger. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in crimson. The navigation computer gave up, displaying only static. Jake's hands moved across manual controls, following instincts he couldn't name. Through the observation port, he glimpsed something that made his breath catch. A planet, green and alive, hidden in the eye of the storm. Then his engines died. The ship plummeted through atmosphere thick with residual energy. Jake fought to keep the nose up, bleeding speed through what remained of his maneuvering thrusters. Treetops rushed up to meet him, an endless canopy of silver-leafed forest. The impact drove consciousness from him in a burst of pain and spinning metal. He woke to the sensation of being watched. Jake's eyes opened slowly, his head pounding in rhythm with his heartbeat. He lay on his back in what remained of his cockpit, smoke drifting through shattered displays. Sunlight filtered through the cracked canopy, carrying unfamiliar scents of alien vegetation. But it was the silhouette perched on his ship's twisted wing that made him freeze. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Blue skin caught the light like polished steel, marked with darker stripes that emphasized the predatory grace of her movements. Cat-like ears twitched atop her head, swiveling to catch sounds he couldn't hear. Her armor was a work of art and warfare combined, form-fitting plates that protected without hampering the fluid way she shifted position. An energy blade hummed at her hip, its glow reflecting off the metal of his ruined ship. But it was her eyes that held him captive. Amber and intelligent, they studied him, with the calculating patience of a hunter who had all the time in the world. "You survived the storms," she said, her voice carrying a purring undertone that raised the hair on his arms. She spoke in perfect English, though her accent wrapped around the words like silk over steel. Jake tried to sit up, wincing as his ribs protested. "Lucky me." Luck had nothing to do with it. She dropped from the wing in one fluid motion, landing without sound on the forest floor. No one passes through the quantum barriers. No one survives them. Yet here you are. More figures emerged from the shadows between the trees. Warriors like her, though none carried themselves with her absolute authority. They moved with feline precision, weapons drawn but not quite aimed, waiting for orders. "I'm Jake Sullivan, Earth Fleet," he managed, hoping diplomacy might work better than bleeding on her planet. "My ship malfunctioned during a reconnaissance mission." Her laugh was like wind chimes made of razors. "Reconnaissance, is that what humans call it when they fly ships into certain death?" She circled him slowly, each step deliberate. "I am Vespera. This is my world, and you are trespassing." I didn't exactly have a choice in the matter. There is always a choice. She stopped in front of him close enough that he caught her natural scent beneath the ozone-sharp smell of her weapons, something like midnight flowers and predator musk. The choice to turn back, the choice to find another route, the choice to die like every other fool who thinks they can navigate what we call the storm maze. Jake met her gaze, refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming that he was prey in the presence of an apex predator. "Maybe I'm not like every other fool." Vespera's eyes narrowed, and for a moment he thought she might kill him where he sat. Instead, she gestured to her warriors. "Bind him, carefully. "You will come with us," she said, already turning away. "If you truly navigated the storms through skill rather than accident, you represent something valuable. If you lied, you will make adequate entertainment for tonight's feast." Strong hands hauled him to his feet. The restraints they placed on his wrists were more sophisticated than anything in Earth's arsenal, energy fields that would tighten if he struggled. Jake found himself marched through forests that grew stranger with each step. The trees towered overhead, their silver leaves rustling with sounds almost like whispers. Creatures watched from the shadows, eyes that reflected light in colors that had no names. Vespera led them along paths invisible to human senses, moving through her domain with the confidence of absolute ownership. She never looked back, but Jake had the distinct impression she was aware of his every movement. When he stumbled over twisted roots, she would slow her pace just enough for him to catch up. When branches caught at his flight suit, she would take routes that offered clearer passage. The fortress rose from the forest like something carved from storm clouds. The storm spire, one of her warriors called it in a language that sounded like controlled growling. Walls of dark stone stretched toward the sky, their surfaces etched with channels that pulsed with inner light. Energy barriers flickered around the structure, and Jake realized they were harmonized with the quantum storms that raged overhead. Inside, the corridors were lit by the same pulsing light he'd seen in the walls. Vespera's boots clicked against polished floors as she led them deeper into her stronghold. Guards bowed as she passed, their respect clearly earned through more than just birthright. This was a warrior who had claimed her throne through strength. The throne room took Jake's breath away. The ceiling soared into darkness, supported by pillars carved from single stones. At the chamber's heart sat a throne that seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves perfectly suited to its current occupant. Vespera settled into it with liquid grace, the energy blade at her hip catching the light. "Remove his restraints," she commanded. "If he tries to run, kill him quickly. I have no patience for fools today." The energy fields around his wrists faded. Jake rubbed circulation back into his hands, very aware of the dozens of weapons trained on him from the shadows. Vespera watched him from her throne, chin resting on one hand, amber eyes unreadable. "Tell me how you did it," she said finally. "Did what?" "The storms have protected this world for 3,000 years. They are beautiful and merciless and absolute. Nothing passes through them, nothing survives them, until you." She leaned forward, and Jake caught a glimpse of something beyond the predator's calm. Curiosity, wonder. "So tell me, human, how did you navigate the unnavigable?" Jake studied the alien queen before him, weighing his words carefully. Truth might get him killed, but lies would certainly do worse. "I don't know how I did it," he said finally. "The storms felt different than our instruments indicated, like they had patterns underneath the chaos." Vespera's tail lashed once behind the throne, a detail he hadn't noticed before. Patterns. Her voice carried a dangerous edge. "You expect me to believe you saw order in the storm maze through human eyes?" "I'm a navigator. It's what I do." Jake kept his stance relaxed despite the weapons trained on him. "Your people have been trapped here for 3,000 years because you're trying to fight the storms instead of reading them." The throne room fell silent except for the low hum of energy conduits in the walls. Several warriors shifted nervously, hands drifting toward weapons. No one spoke to their queen with such casual dismissal of their world's greatest challenge. Vespera rose from her throne in one fluid motion. "Prove it!" "How?" "Tonight, when the storms peak, you will guide a ship through the barrier. If you succeed, we discuss terms. If you fail..." She smiled, revealing teeth designed for tearing flesh. "Your death will at least provide entertainment." Jake's pulse quickened, but not entirely from fear. There was something magnetic about her confidence, the way she moved like violence wrapped in silk. "And if I refuse?" "Then you die now instead of later. Choose quickly." "I'll do it." Hours later, Jake stood in the observation tower, watching lightning that wasn't quite lightning tear across clouds that pulsed with their own inner fire. The storm patterns were hypnotic, beautiful in their alien fury. But underneath the chaos he could see it, the rhythm that called to something in his human mind. The storms fascinate you. He turned to find Vespera watching him from the tower's entrance. She'd removed her armor, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit that emphasized every dangerous curve. Her movements held the same predatory grace, but something in her posture suggested she'd come here as a woman rather than a warrior queen. "They're like nothing we have on Earth," he said. "Quantum energy given form, but stable, controlled somehow." She moved to stand beside him at the window, close enough that her warmth pressed against his arm. "You speak of them as if they were alive." "Aren't they?" Jake watched her reflection in the glass, the way her ears twitched when she was thinking. 3,000 years of perfect consistency. That's not random chaos, Vespera. That's intelligent design. Her name on his lips made her pupils dilate. "You are either brilliant or completely insane." "Maybe both." As evening approached, Vespera led him to the fortress's flight deck. A sleek craft waited there, built for speed and maneuverability rather than firepower. Her warriors had gathered to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to bloodthirsty anticipation. "The storm peak begins in 20 minutes, Vespera said, settling into the pilot's seat. "You will navigate. I will fly." Jake slipped into the navigator's position, running his hands over alien controls that somehow felt familiar. "You're coming with me?" "If you die, I want to see it happen." Her smile was sharp as her energy blade. "If you succeed, I want to understand how." The ship lifted off with barely a whisper of sound. Vespera's piloting was flawless, every movement precise and controlled. She brought them to the storm barrier's edge and hovered there, waiting. Jake closed his eyes, reaching out with senses he couldn't name. The quantum energy washed over him like a tide, carrying information in patterns his human mind could decode. There, a gap in the chaos, lasting maybe 30 seconds. "Port 15 degrees, pitch down 8, he said quietly. "Now!" Vespera responded instantly, trusting his guidance without question. The ship slipped into the storm maze like a needle threading silk. Energy crackled around the hull, but Jake could feel the safe passages, the momentary gaps where the quantum field aligned with their trajectory. "Starboard 20, hold steady for 10 seconds. They danced through the maze of destruction, ship and storms, moving in perfect harmony. Jake felt Vespera's breathing change, her pulse quickening as she realized what was happening. They weren't fighting the storms, they were joining with them. "How?" she whispered, her hand steady on the controls despite the wonder in her voice. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "It feels like coming home." They burst through the outer edge of the storm barrier into clear space. Stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and sharp after the eternal twilight of the storm maze. Vespera brought the ship around in a lazy arc, both of them staring at the barrier that had imprisoned her world for millennia. "No one will believe this," she said finally. "Will you?" Vespera turned to look at him, amber eyes bright with something between hunger and reverence. "I felt what happened in there. The storms, they responded to you. Like they were waiting." By the time they touched down at the storm spire, word had already spread. Warriors lined the flight deck, staring at them with expressions of awe and fear. Vespera stood in the ship's hatchway, addressing her people with the absolute authority of a proven leader. "The human has done what we believed impossible. The storm maze yields to him as it has yielded to no one else." Jake felt the weight of their stares, the sudden shift in how they viewed him. He was no longer just a trespasser or potential meal. He was something far more dangerous, a game-changer. "My queen," called a voice from the crowd. Jake recognized Kalen, Vespera's lieutenant, his expression troubled. "If word of this reaches the outer systems—" "I know." Vespera's tail lashed behind her, a sign Jake was learning meant she was thinking fast. "Double the perimeter guards, sweep for surveillance devices, and find me Rylith. If anyone has been reporting to the cartels, it would be her." The crowd dispersed, leaving Jake alone with Vespera on the flight deck. She approached him slowly, each step deliberate. When she spoke, her voice carried a purring undertone that made his pulse quicken. "You have given me a gift I never expected," she said, "the freedom of my world." "I haven't given you anything yet. One successful flight doesn't mean—" She silenced him by placing one clawed finger against his lips. "You navigate by instinct. You read patterns that our greatest minds cannot perceive. Do you understand what that makes you worth? Jake met her gaze, seeing the predator's calculation warring with something deeper. What? Everything. Vespera's hand slid from his lips to rest against his chest, claws pressing lightly through his flight suit, and that makes you the most dangerous prize in the galaxy. In the distance, beyond the storm barrier that had protected them for 3,000 years, ships began to gather. The attack came at dawn. Jake woke to the sound of energy weapons discharging against the storm spire's shields. Through the windows of his quarters, he could see ships breaking through the storm barrier. Not one or two, but dozens. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive scales of Vorthak's cartel fleet. The door to his room exploded inward. Vespera stood in the smoking doorway, fully armored and magnificent in her fury. Her energy blade hummed with lethal light, and her amber eyes blazed with predatory rage. "They came for you," she snarled, grabbing his arm. "3 separate cartels, coordinated assault. Someone sold us out." "Ryleth? Found her transmitting coordinates an hour ago. She won't be talking to anyone again." Vespera's claws dug into his arm as explosions rocked the fortress. "Move, now!" They ran through corridors filled with smoke and the acrid tang of burning metal. Vespera's warriors fought desperately at every junction, their energy weapons painting the walls in brilliant flashes. Jake saw bodies, some feline, some reptilian, some species he didn't recognize. The cartels had brought everything they had. "My queen!" Kalen appeared from a side passage, his armor scorched and his left arm hanging uselessly. "The eastern wall is breached. Vorthak's shock troops are in the lower levels." "Fall back to the throne room," Vespera commanded. "Activate the storm conduits. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll remember." The throne room had become a fortress within a fortress. Vespera's remaining warriors had taken defensive positions behind overturned furniture and improvised barricades. The great windows that normally showed the storm-wracked sky now revealed the ugly truth. Enemy ships hovering just outside, their weapons trained on the storm spire. "Jake." Vespera grabbed his shoulders, her claws pressing through his shirt. "The ancient archives beneath the throne room. There's something down there you need to see. Something about the storms." "Now? In the middle of a battle?" "Especially now." Her ears flattened against her skull as another explosion shook the fortress. "If Vorthak captures you, he'll use your abilities to break every storm barrier in the galaxy. Billions will die." Before Jake could respond, the main doors burst open. Reptilian shock troops poured through, their scales gleaming black-green in the throne room's light. Behind them came Vorthak himself, 8 feet of muscle and armor, his yellow eyes fixed on Jake with predatory hunger. "Surrender the human, cat!" Vorthak hissed, his voice like grinding stone. "His talents belong to a higher purpose than serving as your pet." Vespera stepped between them, energy blade raised. "The only thing you'll get from me is a warrior's death." The battle erupted with savage intensity. Vespera moved like liquid lightning, her blade carving through enemy armor with contemptuous ease. But there were too many of them, and more kept coming through the breached doors. Jake pressed his hand against the wall, feeling the vibrations of the storm conduits running through the fortress's structure. The quantum energy called to him, stronger here than anywhere else. Without thinking, he placed his palm against one of the conduits. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flooded through him, and suddenly he could feel the entire network of storm generators buried deep beneath Tempest Prime. Not generators, he realized with shock, control systems. The storms weren't natural phenomena or defensive barriers. They were a prison. "The archives!" Vespera shouted over the din of battle, cutting down 2 reptilians with a single stroke. "Go!" Jake ran for the hidden passage behind the throne, following corridors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The archives were vast, filled with crystalline data storage units that hummed with stored information. At the chamber's center stood a holographic display that activated at his approach. The image that formed took his breath away. It was Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This was Earth as it had been thousands of years ago, when humanity first reached for the stars, and they had reached far indeed. The hologram showed human ships spreading across the galaxy, human colonies on dozens of worlds. But something had gone wrong. A war, fought with weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Humanity had been scattered, their colonies isolated, their achievements forgotten. Tempest Prime had been one of those colonies. The quantum storms were terraforming technology, designed to create a perfect environment for human settlement. But the war had damaged the control systems, trapping the colonists' descendants behind barriers they couldn't understand or control. Until now, Jake's hands moved over the ancient control interface, his human DNA unlocking systems that had waited millennia for the right genetic key. The storms weren't just responding to him, they were obeying him. He was their master, their creator's heir. A roar of rage echoed from the throne room above. Vespera was losing. Jake ran back through the corridors, the truth burning in his mind like fire. When he burst into the throne room, he found Vespera backed against her throne, surrounded by Vorthak's forces. Her armor was cracked, blood seeping from wounds that would have killed a lesser warrior. "Surrender, human," Vorthak called, not taking his eyes off Vespera. "Your protector is finished. Come quietly, and I might let her live as my slave." Jake stepped into the center of the room, placing his hands on the storm conduits built into the floor. "I have a better idea." The quantum energy responded to his will like an extension of his own body. Lightning erupted from the walls, discriminating between friend and enemy with surgical precision. Vorthak's shock troops convulsed as energy coursed through their bodies, dropping them where they stood. But Vorthak himself pressed forward, his armor protecting him from the worst of the discharge. His massive claws reached for Jake's throat. Vespera intercepted him with a leap that spoke of pure desperation and love. Her energy blade pierced his armor, sinking deep into his chest. But his claws found her throat, and they fell together in a tangle of blood and fury. "Vespera!" Jake's anguish fed the storm systems, and the entire fortress shook as quantum energy surged through its structure. She pushed Vorthak's corpse aside, struggling to her feet despite the blood flowing from her wounds. "The control system," she gasped. "You found it." "I found more than that." Jake caught her as she swayed, feeling her pulse flutter against his palm. "The storms, they're not alien technology, they're human." Vespera's pupils dilated as understanding dawned. "You're not just navigating them, you're controlling them." Above them, the storm barrier pulsed with new patterns, and Vorthak's remaining ships began to flee in panic. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Word would spread that the quantum storms could be controlled, that their secrets had been unlocked. Every power in the galaxy would come for him now. Jake pressed his hands against Vespera's wounds, feeling her life flowing out between his fingers. The queen who had never shown weakness now lay broken in his arms, her amber eyes growing dim. "Don't you dare die on me," he whispered, his voice rough with desperation. "Human sentiment," she managed, though her lips curved in what might have been a smile. "I told you, weakness is death." "Then be strong, live." Jake looked around the devastated throne room, at the storm conduits built into the walls and floor. The quantum energy hummed through the fortress, responding to his emotions. "I need you." Vespera's ears twitched at the raw honesty in his voice. The medical bay, 3 levels down, but Jake. Her claws caught his wrist as he prepared to lift her. "They'll keep coming. Every cartel, every empire. You've become the most valuable prize in the galaxy." "Let them come." He carried her through corridors that pulsed with quantum energy, the storm systems responding to his will like living things. The medical bay was a testament to alien technology. Healing pods that could regenerate tissue, neural stabilizers that monitored brain function, surgical arms that moved within human precision. Jake placed Vespera in the primary healing pod, watching as it sealed around her wounded form. Nanites flowed across her injuries, beginning the slow process of cellular reconstruction. The readouts were in her language, but somehow he understood them, another gift of the ancient human technology that had shaped this world. "You're learning," came a voice from the doorway. Jake spun, energy crackling around his hands before he recognized Kalen. The lieutenant looked haggard, his armor scarred from battle, but his eyes held newfound respect. The storm conduits, Jake said, letting the energy fade. They're teaching me, downloading information directly into my brain. The same way they taught our ancestors to harness their power. Kalen moved to stand beside the healing pod, studying his queen's still form. But never like this, never with such intimacy. Jake frowned. What do you mean? The storms have always been separate from us, a tool we could use but never truly understand. But you, Kalen's tail lashed behind him. You don't just control them, you are them, part of them. Before Jake could respond, alarms began shrieking throughout the fortress. Kalen's hand dropped to his weapon as his ears flattened against his skull. What now? Jake demanded. More ships, dozens of them. Kalen's expression was grim. Word has spread faster than we expected. They reached the command center to find chaos. The remaining warriors were tracking multiple fleet signatures, all converging on Tempest Prime. Jake recognized some of the configurations. Earth Federation cruisers, their hulls gleaming white against the storm-wracked sky. Others were alien, representing cartels and empires from across the galaxy. They're not fighting each other, one of the warriors reported. They're negotiating, dividing up approach vectors. Jake stared at the tactical display, understanding dawning like ice in his veins. They're forming an alliance. All of them. Against us, Kalen confirmed. Whatever you represent, it's valuable enough to unite natural enemies. The communication array crackled to life, multiple voices speaking in overlapping transmissions. Demand immediate surrender of the human asset. Authorized to negotiate terms for peaceful transfer. Will consider your cooperation when dividing territorial claims. Jake silenced them with a gesture, his connection to the storm systems allowing him to override their communications. In the sudden quiet, he could hear his own heartbeat, steady and determined. How long before they attack? He asked. 6 hours, maybe less. They're still arguing over who gets the largest share of whatever you're worth. Kalen studied the display. We have perhaps 200 warriors left. They have thousands. Jake closed his eyes, reaching out through the quantum network that connected every storm generator on the planet. The information flowed through him. Population centers, industrial facilities, defensive installations, and beneath it all, the sleeping giants his ancestors had built. Not just terraforming equipment, weapons. Evacuate the civilian settlements, he said quietly. Get everyone to the deep shelters. Jake, do it. His eyes opened and Kalen stepped back at what he saw there. I'm going to show them what human engineering is really capable of. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jake remained connected to the storm network, learning systems that had been dormant for millennia. Vespera's warriors followed his orders without question, their faith in their queen extending to the humans she had claimed. When the healing pod finally opened, Vespera emerged transformed. The nanites had not only healed her wounds, but enhanced her natural abilities. Her movements were fluid perfection, her senses sharp enough to track dust motes in still air. How do you feel? Jake asked. Like I could tear apart a battleship with my bare hands. She stretched, testing her renewed body. What did you do to the healing systems? Upgraded them with human medical technology. Consider it a gift. Vespera moved to stand before him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her enhanced metabolism. And what do you want in return? Help me save your world. She studied his face, seeing something there that made her pupils dilate. Our world. Yes, the kiss that followed was desperate and fierce, full of the knowledge that they might not survive the next few hours. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The storm weapons, Vespera said, you found them. Ancient orbital defense platforms, disguised as atmospheric processors. My ancestors were thorough. Jake turned to the tactical display, where the Allied fleets were finally moving into attack formation. They think they're hunting a prize. They have no idea they're walking into a trap that's been waiting 3,000 years to spring. The first enemy ships began their descent through the storm barrier, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. Jake placed his hand on the quantum conduit, feeling the massive weapon systems come online in response to his genetic signature. Let's show them what happens, he said softly, when someone tries to claim what belongs to us. Above them, the quantum storms began to change, no longer barriers but instruments of war. The real battle was about to begin. The first ships died in silence. Jake stood in the Storm Spire's command center, his hands pressed against the quantum conduits, feeling the ancient weapons respond to his will. Above them, what the galaxy had believed to be atmospheric storms revealed their true nature. Beams of concentrated quantum energy lanced out from hidden orbital platforms, turning proud warships into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. "Impossible," breathed one of the enemy commanders over the communication array. "The readings show—" His transmission cut to static as his cruiser vanished in a bloom of light. Vespera watched the tactical display with predatory satisfaction, her enhanced senses tracking every movement of the remaining enemy forces. How many platforms? 37 functional, scattered across the planet's orbital shell. Jake's voice was distant. Most of his consciousness merged with the ancient defense network. "My ancestors were very thorough when they fortified this world." The Allied fleets were in chaos. Earth Federation ships fired desperately at targets they couldn't locate, their sensors blinded by the quantum interference. Alien vessels attempted to retreat through the storm barriers, only to find the passages sealed against them. "This is Admiral Chen of the Federation flagship Prometheus," came a transmission heavy with defeat. "We request immediate ceasefire and negotiation terms." Jake opened his eyes, pulling his awareness back to the command center. "Patch me through to all enemy vessels." Vespera activated the communications array. Across the fleet, hundreds of commanders heard Jake's voice for the first time. "You came to my world uninvited," he said, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You sought to claim me as property, to use my abilities as weapons against innocent worlds. You united natural enemies in greed and ambition." Another orbital platform fired, vaporizing a cartel destroyer that had tried to run for the outer system. "This world is under my protection, as are its people. Any ship that attempts to leave without permission will be destroyed. Any ship that fires on civilian targets will be destroyed. Any ship that refuses to acknowledge Tempest Prime's sovereignty will be destroyed." The communication channels erupted in protests, threats, and desperate attempts at negotiation. Jake silenced them all with a thought. "You have 1 hour to withdraw beyond the system's edge. After that, I will consider your presence an act of war." The tactical display showed the immediate effect of his ultimatum. Ships began breaking formation, their commanders choosing discretion over the potential prize. But not all of them. "Jake," Vespera's hand touched his arm, claws gently pressing against his skin. "The Federation ships aren't retreating." He studied the display, recognizing the stubborn formation of Earth's military doctrine. "They think they're rescuing me from alien captivity." "Are they?" Jake turned to face her, seeing the question in her amber eyes that she was too proud to voice directly. The quantum network still hummed through his consciousness, offering him power beyond imagination. He could reshape the galaxy, claim his birthright as heir to humanity's lost empire, rule worlds beyond counting. Or he could choose something else. "No," he said, stepping closer until their bodies almost touched. "I'm exactly where I belong." Vespera's pupils dilated, and the purr that rumbled from her throat was purely feline. "Even if it means war with your own species?" "My own species abandoned this world 3,000 years ago. They left you and your people to struggle against technology they didn't understand." Jake's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. "You didn't abandon me when you could have sold me to the highest bidder. You fought for me, protected me, made me yours." "And you are mine," she said fiercely. "Let anyone who disputes that come and try to take you." The kiss was different this time, not desperate or urgent, but claiming, a promise made and accepted. When they broke apart, Jake kept her close, their foreheads touching. "The Federation fleet? We'll learn to respect our choices, one way or another." Jake returned to the quantum network, but now Vespera joined him, her enhanced nervous system allowing her to interface with the storm conduits. Together, they guided the orbital platforms with surgical precision. Federation ships found their weapons systems disabled, their engines offline, their crews unharmed but utterly helpless. "This is Admiral Chen. Our ships are dead in space. What are your terms?" Jake's response was broadcast across the entire system. "Tempest Prime withdraws from all previous treaties and alliances. We claim sovereignty over our world and our storm barriers. In return, we offer safe passage through our space to any ship that requests it peacefully." "And if Earth refuses to recognize your independence?" Jake felt Vespera's fierce joy through their shared connection to the storm network. "Then Earth will learn what happens when you try to cage a storm." The Federation ships were released one by one, escorted to the system's edge by orbital platforms that could vaporize them in microseconds. Other vessels followed, cartel ships and alien cruisers fleeing back to their territories, with tales of the human who commanded quantum lightning. Hours later, Jake and Vespera stood on the storm spire's highest balcony, watching their world's storms dance across the sky. But now Jake could see their true beauty, not chaotic destruction, but ordered creation. The storms were singing, harmonizing frequencies that would terraform new worlds, create safe havens for any who needed them. "What happens now?" Vespera asked, her tail curling around his waist in a gesture of possession and affection. "Now we rebuild. Not just your world, but the network my ancestors created. There are other lost colonies out there, other worlds cut off by the ancient war. We can reconnect them, create something better than either of our species achieved alone." Vespera's claws traced patterns on his chest, marking him as hers in ways that went deeper than skin. A galactic alliance built on partnership rather than conquest. Led by a queen who rules through strength and a navigator who reads the patterns others can't see. She laughed, the sound rich with promise and possibility. "I like this future you're navigating toward." Jake pulled her closer, feeling the storm network respond to their joined presence. Above them, the quantum barriers pulsed with new patterns, not walls to keep intruders out, but beacons calling the lost home. He had fallen into her world by accident, but he would stay by choice, and anyone who tried to separate them would learn why the storms sang with such beautiful, terrible power. They were no longer alone in the galaxy. They were the beginning of something new.